Fostering connection through vulnerability, the People Pleaser podcast validates struggles, celebrates growth, and inspires positive change. Together, let's embrace authenticity, challenge patterns, and evolve with compassion. Hey everyone, it's Corie. Welcome back to another episode of the People Pleaser podcast. Today's episode was a little juicy, but I always like to start with some of my own people-pleasing behaviors from this week. And this week I had a little bit of a meltdown, I'm not going to lie. So this was over the span of 2 days. I had to ask 3 different people for something, and I noticed that I had so much anxiety about being kind of a nuisance or asking for help. And so one of them was I needed something mailed to me by a family member, and it's a pretty pressing piece of paper for my immigration interview. And I mean, they obviously will understand that, but the fact that I needed like the original signed copy and I had to be like, can you actually put it in the mail? Like, can you go buy a stamp and go to the post office? Was just like it just felt like I made it so huge in my mind, like what I was asking. Of course, I received nothing but support, but just like, oof. And then following that, I was trying to get a sense of how much an upcoming dentist procedure is going to cost because, y'all, I have a lot of big expenses coming up with my immigration interview being in Montreal, and like there's just so much. And so I was trying to decide if I would keep my dentist appointment or move it to a little bit further in the future when things settle down a bit. And of course, it was one of those classic examples of like, I call the dentist and they're like, oh, well, you'll have to talk to your insurance provider. And I talk to my insurance provider and they're like, oh, you'll have to talk to the dentist. And I was able to manage that. But then when I thought about like actually calling the dentist back and being like, actually, you need to phone and you need to speak to my insurance provider, like because you are the dentist, you are doing the invoicing. That's when things started to get pretty dicey over here. And then finally, and again, this was like all just back to back to back. So they're getting like less and less intense. But like for me, it was like, oh, not another thing. I'm going out of town this weekend and I get like a meal delivery kit sent to my house. And I realize that because it's the long weekend, I'm going to be away when it gets delivered. And so I had to ask my landlord if she would be okay with like bringing it in and refrigerating it. And like at that point, I had already asked these other 2 people for something. I was like, I can't. And I just noticed that I built it up to be this like big scary thing and that I was just being an inconvenience and like things are so trivial and I'm making it such a big deal and blah, blah, blah. So everything was fine. Absolutely everyone was completely supportive and accepting. And honestly, like I feel for my husband because I just called him and had a big cry because I'm like, I have to ask so many people so many things. And he's like, babe, it's okay. It's okay. So we're learning. And, I did take away from that it was hard, but it was okay. And that everybody actually wanted to help me. So today I am going to talk about 3 of my top toxic traits as a people pleaser. So buckle up. I'm about to just lay it all out on the table for you. And this is specific to me, but don't be a stranger if, you relate to some of these things. You could maybe let me know, like, hey, Corie, you're not alone in this. I got you. We're in this together. All right. So number 1, saying yes with resentment. So I think it's safe to say that it's pretty common knowledge that people pleasers love to say yes. It's as a result of wanting to appease, wanting to be liked, but honestly being afraid that if we say no, all those things, the being liked, the appeasing people, they won't be true, as if a no is like a bad, unlikable trait. So what has happened to me is that I've found myself stuck in these yes patterns, that I'm saying yes when I actually want to say no. But because I'm allowing my fear of rejection or being disliked to reign precedent, I will still say yes, and then that will turn into resentment. And what sucks about this is that the only person I can really be mad at in these scenarios is myself. So all that resentment that I'm projecting onto the person that asked me something is completely unwarranted. That is all resentment that needs to be redirected at myself. And so why do we do this? Like, what is actually going on? I think for me, I think about what people expect from me, and I want to continue to live up to whatever that image is that they have of me. If they're asking me to dog sit or house sit or do some sort of favor, they're asking me because they trust me or because I've done something like this for them in the past. And through that, I earned their respect, their appreciation, etc. And because those things feel good, I want to uphold them, and I want them to continue to feel that way about me. And in my tiny little people-pleasing mind, I think that the only way they will like and respect me is if I dog sit, if I house sit. And that undermines the entire relationship that we have, the building blocks that we have, the connection that we've grown. It's actually minimizing myself and deducing me to just a house sitter or just a dog sitter, as if that's all they see me as and all they want from me. My saying yes is actually a statement of low self-esteem, believing that the only way I can hold on to these connections is by giving them what I think they want and what I think they expect of me. And if you're saying yes when you mean no, you aren't giving that relationship the honesty that it deserves. I can bet that no one wants you to do anything for them if you're doing it resentfully. The other thing that I've really started to notice about saying yes all the time is that I've completely lost touch with what a genuine yes feels like. I've almost started to pause before saying yes to anything because I no longer trust my yeses. Wait, do I want to say yes? Is this a genuine yes? Am I being honest? It's actually led me to missing out on social opportunities because I've somehow over time made a connection between saying yes and having my boundaries crossed or being resentful. So the alternative is to say no because I've begun to associate my no's with safety and not being in a situation where I might disappoint myself or others. The pendulum of boundaries is so sensitive, and unfortunately, there isn't a formula for what might be a yes and what might be a no. And I think that sometimes when I'm feeling overwhelmed or burnt out, I don't really know what my brain or my body needs. I lose touch of that. And so I go into this autopilot, and very often it's fear-based. Boundaries are nuanced and require revisiting often, depending on the day, the mood, the friendship, the energy, etc. So that kind of leads me into my next toxic trait, which are fierce, unrelentless boundaries. There are definitely times when we need rigid and impenetrable boundaries, but sometimes when I've been people-pleasing for way too long, I feel like my boundaries are being crossed repeatedly. I will become so burnt out and exhausted that I will construct this like super rigid boundary that maybe didn't really need to be so intense. This often sounds like absolute language, like never, always, have to, cannot, will not, none, everyone, like very like strong language that just seems so final. I've shared a little bit of this next example in my friendship episode, but I want to unpack it a little bit more to give it more context to what I'm talking about right now in terms of these like rigid, relentless boundaries. So I had a friend, this is going back a number of years, that I met at a job. We both worked at the same place. And I have so many amazing things that I could say about this friend. Honestly, like she was really someone that cultivated a sense of community amongst her friend group. And she invited me in, like she invited so many of us in, and she was all about like building community. And she was also like really skilled at sharing skills. So like bringing people in to like do things together. And during the pandemic, we lived really close to each other. So we ended up going on a lot of walks. And at this time, she was dating someone that she herself could identify as toxic. However, she continued to try to make the relationship work. And so on our walks, I found that the topic of this relationship took up so much space in our connection that I began to get like really frustrated and eventually really resentful. Like I'm sure we can all relate to that on some level when the connection feels out of whack or out of balance. And it can be really tricky to like know how to like course correct and kind of get back on track. And if it's not happening naturally, it can be really awkward to like go in there very like intentionally or even like what feels like manually, like trying to adjust the flow of conversation or the connection. So I did try like many different times to give her feedback about the relationship and was trying to kind of like affirm some of her challenges and like really trying to work through some of the problems with her. Like I did try that. And I think that's where I got even more frustrated is that, like she knew it wasn't good. I knew it wasn't good. And yet like, here we are kind of like just going in these cycles. And the reality is that even though I was trying to like workshop this with her, my resentment was building. And the reason my resentment was building was because I wasn't actually telling her how I was feeling in our connection. I continued to go on these walks and just like harbor this resentment and frustration without her even knowing. So fast forward, I'm going to leave out a lot of context, but she had formed a group chat over like a several month period where she was looking for feedback on a project that she was working on. And if I'm remembering correctly, like she needed a test group. So I'd been a part of this group chat, but I was staying pretty inactive, like mostly just kind of like reading the messages, but not engaging. Because I honestly at that time had a lot going on in my personal life. And so when it actually came time to engage with this test group, like when she was kind of like, okay, guys, like now's the time, I told her that I just like didn't have the capacity. I couldn't take anything else on at that time. And I expected like that would be okay. Like I certainly didn't have any worries in being able to be honest about that. I mean, I was vague because to be totally honest, no one really knew what was going on for me at that time. And I was keeping things very close to my chest and truly was in a bad place. I don't really know how else to say it. I was not in a good place. So this is not me operating at my full potential. So when I told her that I couldn't help, she gave me feedback that she was pretty upset by this. And she even went as far as saying that she had supported me with my various endeavors over the years and was hoping for my support in return, which, I mean, I understand that. But because of my like mental and emotional load at that time, And the fact that I still had like a ton of silenced frustrations and resentment towards her. I told her that I just needed to step away from the friendship completely. And from that point on, we essentially cut ties, which like, whoa. If I look back on it, that is like a whoa. But I truly just need to emphasize that not only in this connection was I feeling that like my boundaries had been crossed or that I wasn't getting my needs met, but like that was just one part of a much broader situation where those exact same things were happening like across the board in my life. So I almost, there's that kind of like she was the straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing. Like it wasn't her fault. There was parts of her that was involved in this, but a lot of it actually had nothing to do with her. So I'm now several years later feeling remorseful that things ended the way they did. It was a situation where I went from having like no boundaries at all to out of the blue having like these very strong, impenetrable boundaries that very likely blindsided her. And I really didn't give her an opportunity to understand. Like I was done. Because of how heavy my life was at the time, I couldn't even imagine trying to explain myself. And I didn't even want to. I wanted her to just know that my capacity was exceeded and I didn't want to have to feel guilty about going back on my word for her. Like I was really in kind of survival mode. In my mind and in my heart, this is still unresolved. However, it is a scenario that may just need to stay that way. And that's something that's very confusing for a people pleaser. I know that I hurt her and I know that I left her in the dark with what was truly going on for me. And there is a part of me that wants to reach out and apologize. And there's another part of me that thinks that maybe I just need to let it go and learn from it. I do feel bad, but like, yeah, I don't know. Like I'm very open to feedback on this one because it does feel very unresolved. And it does actually kind of lead me into my third toxic trait as a people pleaser, and that is the guilt spiral. When I have hurt someone, or even if I think I might have hurt someone or upset them, I so quickly, like instantly, lean into guilt. And for me, guilt is the act of like self-punishment. Guilt are like the nasty, mean, unhelpful words I tell myself about myself. And as a people pleaser, I can access guilt like that. If I say something and I can't really gauge how I made someone feel, I automatically assume it upset them or that they are now thinking negatively about me. This guilt then influences my future behaviors and interactions. If I think that I've hurt someone or left a negative impression, my guilt and shame will propel me into like excessive people pleasing. I will go out of my way to try and change their mind, or I'll like dig around to assess whether or not they're actually upset with me. And as a people pleaser, I'm always trying to gauge the temperature of everyone around me. And honestly, I take on so much responsibility that is not mine, as if to think that I can single-handedly control other people's emotions. And in these moments of guilt and shame, it's as if I believe that I'm actually trying to hurt people, that just me being me is offensive. And it also completely undermines the capacity of others to not only care for themselves, but to let me know if I actually hurt them. Sometimes I worry that these thoughts and feelings border on narcissism, and I know that word is like so overused, but it's because I think that I have so much power and control over people's emotions. So, okay, I need to unpack that a little bit later, maybe with my therapist, but I hope you know what I mean. Like, to think that I just in like showing up as myself and then like kind of having maybe a moment of discomfort or confusion is like me having this deeply negative impact on someone. Like that's a little extreme. So I'll give you a silly little small example because this is often what it is. It's these small, very like human examples. So if I interrupt someone and I realize that I interrupt them, I will not only correct the behavior and let them know that I interrupted and apologize, But I will then start to think that they think I'm rude or that I take up too much space or that I'm crowding the airwaves. And the sad reality check is that those aren't actually their thoughts. Those are my thoughts about myself. The way I'm trying to counter this cycle is to think about when I'm interrupted, do I immediately question the person's character and assume that they're a shitty person as a whole? No, of course not. So why would they think that of me? And why am I thinking that of me? And I mean, I don't think this is a new piece of information, but so much people pleasing comes from a lack of self-esteem or low confidence. And so it is important to recognize that those feelings that we are actually trying to project onto other people to be no, these are your feelings about me. They're actually our feelings about ourselves. And that's where the work has to start. Why do I think I'm taking up too much space? Why do I think that if I accidentally interrupted someone that this makes me this rude, antisocial, narcissist? It honestly feels good to lay these toxic patterns out and recognize them as toxic and unhelpful, because my goal is to share as openly as I can to not only break down stigma, but to begin naming the behaviors that are getting in our way. People pleasing has been a behavior or a way of life that has become increasingly uncomfortable for me anyways, because I'm I'm really beginning to realize what these behaviors are and why I'm doing them. And so having this platform to really pick these behaviors apart is helping me and hopefully you see that we don't need them. They need to go. So my DMs are always open. Send me a message or a voice note and let me know what resonated. I'm so pumped that there are so many of you listening and that you're letting me know what lands, because I mean, sometimes it's just me out here talking in my apartment, and you guys are what kind of brings this full circle. So thank you so, so much. And I can't wait to talk to you soon. Once again, this is Corie with the People Pleaser Podcast. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. And if you liked what you heard, please consider leaving a 5-star rating and a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can find daily content from me on both Instagram and TikTok. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you on the next episode.